Welcome to Anything But Ordinary. Tonight's topic, Unexplained Mysteries, Spontaneous Human Combustion. I am your awesome host, Spooky, and here is your other most awesome host, Raven.
Hello? Sorry, I forgot to unmute my microphone.
I've done that. I've sat here before and talked for about 5 minutes and then realized my mic was muted.
I know. Sorry we got on just a hair late. We were too busy laughing in chat about Spooky's
mishap.
Yes, but I don't know. Anyway, so hopefully you've had a good last week, Spooky.
Yeah, I did. I had a pretty good week.
Yep, the weather's sort of warming.
It's been raining. I mean, it rained here for 2 days, and the other night it stormed so bad it kept me awake most of the night, but it was nice today. Tomorrow, if it's nice and warm, I might go mushroom hunting.
Okay. Anyway, I just don't see you mushroom hunting, but I don't know. Tonight's topic, spontaneous human combustion. I don't know. As far as I know, that topic's kind of been circling around since like the early 1700s is what I was kind of reading up on, because I've seen it's been written in novels. We have it in tabloids, of course. You see that when you're hanging out in the grocery store picking up the tabloid waiting.
Yeah.
You got it on internet blogs, you have it on TV shows, you have it in movies, you have it in documentaries. I mean, it's been in a lot of things for a long time.
Spontaneous human combustion, or SHC, and for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure that all of you do, it's a term for cases of combustion of human body without an apparent external source of ignition.
Right. No, this topic was a show suggestion that we had gotten a while ago, and I know we've been doing a lot of the viewer requests lately because we're just trying to get a bunch of them in because we've had a lot of them. And, you know, I know for a while we were doing just a bunch of stuff that me and you wanted to do, so we've been trying to do a lot more of the viewer requests a bunch in a row lately. But, I mean, you know, you and I, we're not scientists, okay? So we're not here to sway any of you guys who are listening now and who are going to be listening later in a podcast to believe one way or the other. But we're just going to kind of share stories that we found on the net, along with kind of like different theories that people have randomly discussed throughout the years. And then I think we're just going to kind of like, you know, banter just about our own thoughts. And, you know, tonight it's mainly aimed more for the entertainment factor. You know, if, you know, we're not here to prove anything, but just kind of share what's been out there and talked about and all these different stories of supposedly reported cases of SHC occurring throughout the years.
Now, some of these cases get pretty graphic in description, so I want to put a warning out there that if you're sensitive, you may not want to listen to some of this.
Well, yeah, that's right, because you might say some things or show a photo. You're right. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Now, I'm also going to say right off that I have a hard time believing that such a thing could occur.
Yeah.
But we try our best to look into finding some interesting cases and theories on this topic to share with you guys and for the viewers' request. And we do try to get to the viewers' request as soon as we can.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that we're constantly wanting to do and talk about that. And then, you know, getting into these too, it's like we want to get to them.
Right.
But, and then we have real life happen where we have to take time off for a while because stuff comes up. Doctor stuff, whatever.
Exactly.
But, you know, tonight I think we're going to kind of just, like I'm saying, jump around with this topic. You know, maybe like share a story, go to a theory or two, and just kind of like random banter. And, you know how that is. That leads us into many directions. You know?
Yeah.
You know, because it's kind of like everything's a big spider web for us. We start talking about something, then we go off some weird tangent, but then it always comes back to what we're talking about anyway. And plus, I've been sick for like over a week. So I'm kind of like blah. So I apologize now to anybody if I cough or sneeze on the show. but I got sick last Monday, and I'm still kind of plugged up and
Well, if you got to sneeze or
congested.
cough, just turn your head. I don't want to catch it.
But you already did, kind of, so.
Kind of, yeah.
Anyway, spontaneous human combustion, if it wasn't for, like, the internet and the Unsolved Mysteries, they used to play that show. I don't even know if they still do.
Yeah, they still do, actually.
But if it wasn't for that and the internet, I don't know, I probably would have never really pondered, like, a thought or two on this topic myself. But just because, we know that the human body is made up of, like, 60% water. The blood is like, I don't know, like 90-some%. And then you got the skin, the brain, the heart, and the muscles. You got like 70-some% just of water into that. And then your kidneys and your lungs are like 80. And then your bones, of course, they got water in there. That's like 20-some%. So it's like a bunch of everything of you is made up of water.
Right, exactly. The human body is so full of water that it just... You kind of wonder how something like this could even happen.
Right. But, I don't know. Can the human body self-ignite and burst into flames? I just...
Well, we do know that there are some things that can and have been documented to self-ignite.
That's true. You got, you got compost.
Yeah, you got hay, you got oil rags and coal dust. Take, for instance, mulch. Okay? Mulch is a wood product, and it is always decomposing. Always. Right. So a large enough pile of it can build up enough heat and burst into flames. In fact, there have been cases of this happening, and it still happens. I think it's not too long ago. I think it was somewhere in upstate New York. Actually, I think it was near Buffalo, where a mulch pile self-ignited and burned up several trees in the process.
Right. That was pretty huge, too. It happens, like, you know what? Mulch fire and all that stuff, it happens more than people think. I think it happens, like, over 100 and some times every summer,
Yeah.
There's tons of cases that you see. And it doesn't even have to be, like, in a field or anything. It could be, like, just in front of your house when you got a bunch of stuff piled up on it, and then it just heats up. Because they're always telling people to kind of keep the mulch beds they have around their house or, businesses.
Yeah, because a lot of people mulch their flower beds. And I was driving through town today, and I noticed people out mulching, getting their gardens ready.
Right. But if you don't keep that stuff, kind of moist, sorry for those people who hate that word, but moist during the drier seasons, that's when you're going to have these spontaneous combustion things like what you were talking about.
Right.
But that's why I think it's better just to have the rock instead of the wood chips sometimes around your house, especially if it's near the gas pipes and stuff outside.
Yeah.
Just because, it has that...
Or near the house, right there by the house.
Right. Because of the decomposition, it starts to create that kind of heat issue, like you were saying.
Exactly. And you also have straw. Now, any farmer can tell you that straw produces heat, and more than once a barn has burned to the ground because the straw in their lofts build up enough heat that it just burst into flames. Now, this is the reason that a lot of farmers no longer store straw in their haylofts. And it's also why straw is used as bedding for animals in the wintertime.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because if you think about it too, just because randomly, and you never know, somebody might be listening and this might help them one day. But, I know it keeps the animals warm, but if it's also like a good survival use. Because if you're ever like caught outside in the wintertime, and if you see like these hay bales and stuff, just go dig yourself into one of them. Just kind of stuff yourself inside one of those big hay bales, or just start stuffing it in your clothing because it's going to help save your life. Just because straw does have that ability, and that's like a major thing. Because a lot of people get trapped out in the winter and your car breaks down or whatever, and you got all that stuff just hanging around that could go save your life,
Well, another thing about straw. I was surfing the internet, and I came to this website about building houses out of straw. Now, to me, it was obvious that the people involved had no idea about the heat that straw produces. And it just, it made me wonder how many of those houses went up in flames, and they can't figure out why.
It's just it's stupid. Right? Because mold starts to grow in that stuff, and then it eventually builds up, creating the hay to generate that type of heat to self-ignite, and then it's like poof, bye-bye house. I mean, that's pretty stupid. I mean, don't you think they would have logically looked into that a bit more, since they're, we already know. I mean, it's written in history tons of times, and it keeps occurring every year anyway, about all these farming incidences with, hey, why would somebody go and build their house out of straw? What are they, like the Three Little Pigs and stuff?
I don't know. But to me, it just seems like that they just did not research it. I mean, don't get me wrong now, it makes good insulation. And some people will put bales of straw around the foundation of their house in the wintertime to help with drafts that come in and come up through your floors. But the thing of it is, in summertime, it's like Raven just said, that mold builds in straw, and straw does get moldy.
Well,
and the more that builds up in there, it also helps fire that heat. And it's nowadays you seldom see straw in haylofts. Now, there are still some farmers that do that. But every year, there's a barn burns down because of the heat built up by the straw.
Right. Other people are talking, I mean, there's people in chat talking about different stuff too, like flour, red bark dust and stuff. I mean, we do know of all these different things that can spontaneous combust, There's other things too. Oh, yeah.
Oily rags, okay?
Totally.
Now, oily rags, this usually happens during the drying process. Now, oil dries by oxidation, and this produces heat, and it has caused oily rags to just burst into flames. And in fact, this can happen with just about any type of oil on the rags, from motor oil to linseed oil to oil-based stain used on decks. And this is why you do not wash oily rags and then dry them in your dryer, because you cannot wash all the oil out, and many times oily rags or clothing have caused dryer fires.
Well, yeah, and people still keep doing all that stuff. I mean, linseed oil rigs, I know, are a common fire that occurs, because people, they tend to, because a lot of people use linseed oil. And a lot of people, they just tend to fold the cloth over for even a little bit. If you just go up for a while or whatever, and then you get distracted, or you just toss it over in a corner, I mean, eventually, because it's folded up on itself, it's going to start to generate that heat, because it's insulated by that cloth. And then the temp starts to rise, and it speeds up the process. And like you were saying, the linseed oil is readily oxidized in the air, and then it's like, poof. And then you're like, what? And you're like, dang. And your house on fire, or your garage is on fire. Or, Reminds me of that video of that lady I sent you today when she was like, the neighbor came knocking on my house and she didn't have her shoes. And I'm like, why she ain't got no shoes? And she's like, the apartment's on fire. Remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway, but this stuff, it self-ignites, you know what I mean? And that's why you have all these stinking residential fires and stuff, because people forget.
And a lot of garage fires from this.
I mean, you got to be careful.
Do you know why oil-based paints, though, seldom... I mean, they do now, but they seldom burst into flames.
Yeah.
That's because there is not really a lot of oil in that paint. There is more water than oil, and paint dries by evaporation and not oxidation. In fact, anything that dries by evaporation is not likely to start a fire.
I apologize for coughing over you. I don't know. Right. So, like, we all know there's some things that can self-ignite and spontaneously begin to combust. So, I mean, we all know that works, okay? But, I don't know, but can people suddenly just burst into flames with no known reason? That's the thing that we were kind of digging around with. And, we did our best to kind of do a little bit of this for entertainment purposes, really. I know there's other people out there who are doing, like, really serious shows on it. But we are going to bring in a little bit of everything that we can. But according to these stories or cases that you and I found, they were both of, like, deceased, and I did find some reports or cases of actual survivors of, I guess if you want to term it, SHC,
Right.
And these have been passed down for eons. I mean, it seems to let us believe that I guess there is this occurring, but I don't know. Why don't you just go ahead and start telling some stories?
Well, One of the first known reported cases that I discovered took place as early as 1663 by a Danish anatomist named Thomas Bartholin. Now, he told of a woman in Paris who went up in ashes and smoke while sleeping. Her straw mattress, I started to say her straw mess. Her straw mattress she was sleeping on was unmarred by the fire.
Yeah.
And at least one member of nobility, a Countess Cornelia de Bandi, had her life claimed by SHC. In the 1700s, the Countess was found halfway between her bed and her window one morning, and everything except her lower legs and 3 fingers were burned. Now, apparently she had risen from her bed to open the window in the middle of the night, but combusted before she could reach the window. And in the room, 2 candles had been burned, or at least the tallow had been burned. The wicks were still left. The wicks were completely unburned. And soot covered the room, including some bread on a plate that had been left on a table. And to give you an idea of how strange the 1700s were, the bread was taken from the plate and offered to a dog, but the dog refused to eat it. Can you imagine here, Fido, come eat mama? It just... I can't imagine that.
They don't waste things back then, I guess, but,
Apparently not.
Right.
Mama didn't completely burn. Come here, Fido. You can have the rest of her.
Yeah.
In 1725, the wife of a Parisian innkeeper, I'm probably tearing the heck out of these words.
That's okay. We're both sick, so
a
just do our
Parisian
best.
innkeeper, Nicolette Millet, was found after her husband roused the entire inn when he smelled smoke. Now, her remains, or I should say what was left of her, was in the kitchen, and she was almost completely reduced to ash. But the wooden utensils around her were untouched. They were not burned at all. Now, there are other accounts that have her burned on a straw pallet with the straw only a little damaged. I don't know. It depends on which website you find it on, because I found 2 different accounts of this story. Anyway, this all looked suspicious, so her husband was tried and found guilty of murder. Now, he appealed, and he used the spontaneous human combustion defense and was exonerated. And after Nicole's death was ruled to be due to a visitation of God.
But back then,
Yeah, so, okay, we are talking 1700s. So the term spontaneous human combustion has been used for centuries. This is not a new term.
Yeah. I mean, it's been around, as far as we could find back some of the earlier... Well, there was a case, I think it was in 1600s, too. But, we did the best we could.
Well, in 1673, a Frenchman by the name of Jonas Dupont published a book called, now let's see if I can really rip this one apart. De Insidious Corporis Humani Spontaneous.
Yeah.
Which it was a collection of SHC cases. So, like I said, this is not a new topic, but one that has been told and discussed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it's been said that there have been at least 200 known reported cases of spontaneous human combustion since then.
Right.
I'm sure there's been a lot more.
Right, but
this was 1673.
Right, but from what people are gathering on their own and what we can find on the internet, and a lot of times these people may be having these things occur to them, but people aren't labeling them as SHC. So I found some kind of newer ones or whatever, but I found like one in 1943 happened like January 13th. Now we don't know if these are real or not. We're just sharing stories with y'all. Like we said, this is for entertainment, not for, hardcore, like factual. Everything we say is, drink the Kool-Aid. But this one happened to this guy. I guess he was like 52 years old, and his name was like Alan Small. And it happened in, I guess, Maine in Deer Isles. Now what they were saying was like they found him burnt to death, and the carpet like beneath his body was kind of like scorched, but there was actually no other signs of fire in the house. And all they kind of found on him was like this small pipe that was unlit. Or it wasn't even on him. I guess the pipe was kind of like on the shelf. And the stove, we got that little shelf above the stove, with all your lids and everything was up around that place. But nothing around in the house was scorched or messed up except for the carpet right underneath him. So it's like they're saying he just burst into flames, and that was the only thing that went up in the house. Everything else stayed fine. Yeah, which I find kind of interesting.
On July 1st in 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida, a woman named Mary Hardy Reeser, who was a 67-year-old widow, she spontaneously combusted while sitting in her easy chair. At about 8 a.m. on July 2nd, Reeser's landlady, Pansy Carpenter, arrived at her door with a telegram. Now, she was the one that found Mary Reeser. And all that remained of this 175-pound woman and her chair were a few blackened seat springs and a section of her backbone and a small shrunken skull the size of a baseball and 1 foot that was encased in a black stained slipper. Oh, and about 10 pounds of ashes. Mm-hmm. Now, the police report declared that Mrs. Reeser went up in flames when her highly flammable rayon acetate nightgown caught fire, probably because of a dropped cigarette. Now, one medical examiner stated that the 3,000-degree heat that was required to destroy the body should have destroyed the apartment as well, because the damage was just minimal. Yeah. And the ceiling and the upper walls were covered with soot. Now, there were no chemical accelerants found. Reeser's remains were largely ashes and were found among the remains of the chair that she was sitting in. And only part of her left foot, which was wearing the slipper, remained. Mm-hmm. There were, they said that there were plastic household objects at a distance from the chair that were softened and had lost their shape. And
so they're kind of like, what you're saying is like the temp of the heat kind of...
The fire was intense enough that it melted these plastic things,
but as far as the other
that
things,
were sitting...
Right, but as far as the other things, it just kind of softened it. It didn't like melt them or burn them down into...
No, it didn't. It didn't burn them down. It didn't melt them completely, but it had softened them enough that they lost their shapes. Reeser's skull was found among the ashes, but it was shrunken, and some say to the size of a teacup. Now, the extent of this shrinkage was enough that one of the official investigators had remarked that it was not an illusion caused by the absence of facial features, meaning the lips, the ears, and the nose. They were all gone. And the shrinking of the skull also is not a regular feature of alleged cases of SHC.
Yeah.
This is probably what led some of the investigators to believe that the fire was caused by other means. Mm-hmm. That her case just was not to them a typical human combustion case. On July 7th of 1951, the St. Petersburg's police chief, a J.R. Reichert, sent a box of evidence from the scene to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. We all know how competent that guy was.
Spooky.
He included...
Sorry for coughing.
He included glass fragments found in the ashes and 6 small objects that he thought to be her teeth, a section of the carpet, and the surviving shoe. Now, even though the body was almost totally cremated, which required very high temperatures, the room showed little evidence of the fire. Reichert included a note saying that we request any information or theories that could explain how a human body could be so destroyed and the fire confined to such a small area, and so little damage done to the structure of the building, and the furniture in the room were not even scorched or damaged by smoke. Now, the FBI eventually declared that Reeser had been incinerated by the wick effect. Now, according to the FBI, she was known to be a user of sleeping pills, and having fallen unconscious and fell unconscious while smoking.
Mm-hmm. And then they think they set her clothes on fire.
And then set fire to her night clothes.
Yeah. Well, this is everything they're speculating.
This is what they're speculating on, right?
Right.
The FBI wrote in its report that once the body starts to burn, there is enough fat and other inflammable substances to permit varying amounts of destruction to take place. And sometimes this destruction by burning will proceed to a degree which results in almost complete combustion of the body.
Right. That's a bunch of things that people are talking about. Which we're going to go into. We're going to keep telling stories, talk about theories and everything else, So it's kind of going to be a jump around tonight with you guys. So.
Right. Now, at the request of the police chief of St. Petersburg, the scene was also investigated by a physical anthropologist by the name of Wilton Krogman. He was a professor of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Mm-hmm. And he spent some time, quite a bit of time in the 1930s experimenting and examining the remains of these incidents in order to aid, in the detection of crimes. Now, because of this, Krogman was frequently consulted by the FBI, but after he examined the scene and read the FBI's report, he strongly disputed the FBI's conclusions.
Yeah, because, Go on, sorry. I'll talk about it a little bit after you're done talking.
Okay.
So he... Because he had his concern.
The full circumstances of the death and Krogman's objections to the FBI's version of events, though, would not become known publicly for at least a decade.
Yeah.
Now, in 1961, an article for the General Magazine and History Chronicle of the University of Pennsylvania, Krogman wrote extensively about the Reeser case. His remarks included, he said, I find it hard to believe that a human body, once ignited, will literally consume itself and burn itself out as a candle wick, excuse me, guttering in the last residual pool of melted wax. Just what happened on the night of July 1st, 1951 in St. Petersburg, Florida, we may never know. Right. Though this case still haunts me. And also with regard to Reeser's shrunken skull, he wrote, the head is not left complete in ordinary burning cases.
Well, because wouldn't you think, I'll say this in case I forget this thought, and we did give viewer discretion above in the beginning of the show, so I'll just say it again in the middle of this. We may say some things, or you guys might see something that might kind of upset you, but usually when you have an intense heater like that, wouldn't you think it wouldn't shrink, but it would expand or explode?
I think it kind of depends. It wouldn't shrink.
I don't think. I mean, but I also read other cases where there were,
if nothing else, it would just burn up, and there would be nothing left except bone.
Right. Well, when I mean explode, meaning like the brain would bubble and crack the skull open, meaning
well, it would definitely
expand. Expand. I would think it'd expand more than it would shrink. But there are a couple other cases that we're going to talk about tonight that they did mention it having a similar skull shrinking too. So I don't know. Maybe she was hit by some radio wave or some bizarre government testing. Who knows?
Well, he also stated that it does not shrink.
Alien
It,
ray.
yeah. Um, he also stated that it does not shrivel or systematically reduce to a smaller size. He said that in the presence of heat sufficient to destroy soft tissues, the skull would literally explode in many pieces. And I can agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And he also stated that he had never known any exception to this rule. And also in his report, Krogman concluded, he said, I cannot conceive of such complete cremation without more burning of the apartment itself. In fact, the apartment and everything in it should have been consumed, which I agree with that also.
Mm-hmm.
I regard it as the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and as I review it, the short hairs on my neck bristle with vague fear. Were I living in the Middle Ages, I'd mutter something about black magic. Now, later, having put this statement on record, Krogman moved away from his position.
Mm-hmm.
He put forward the theory that Reeser had been murdered at another location, and her murderer had access to crematorium-type equipment and had incinerated her body. Now, this hypothetical murder
Mm-hmm.
had then murderer had then transported the results of the partial cremation back to the apartment and used portable heat generating equipment to add the finishing touches, such as the heat buckled plastic objects and the warm doorknob. So apparently this was not a typical SHC case.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the FBI was just looking for a reasonable explanation so they could close a case that they really had no logical explanation for.
Well, right, but also, I just think it's interesting. But, anytime the government is involved in something, and, how do we know what was going on in this lady's life? How do we know what she was involved in? And I'm not trying to just be disrespectful for anybody, but us, we like to kind of look at all avenues and views and look at the bigger picture, and then instead of just looking at one little puzzle piece, we try to work it all the way around, but who knows what could have been involved with all of this.
Right, but the part that convinced me that it was not a case of SHC is the shrunken skull. I mean, of all the reports and cases I read, not a one of them mentioned this occurring. But since it was classified as such, I felt that I should include this story.
I did read a couple of them where the skull was shrunken, and I think I might be talking about a couple of them here too. But I just, it's hard for us to say what is and what isn't, but
right.
It's because we weren't there.
We weren't there, and we really know absolutely nothing about this.
Well, right.
Subject.
We know
except for what we read and we researched.
Right. But like we said, we're not like scientists. And
True.
Tonight's
We are
more
not
for
scientists.
entertainment purposes or whatever. But we are going to kind of banter about all the different theories that other people have been talked about. And we'll go from like something that seems more plausible to the downright just what, you know what I mean? But that's what we do. We throw it all out there,
That's
and
right.
we let y'all decide. But with this planet and everything that occurs, you never know. There may be the rare chance. But I don't know. I read a couple. I found that case interesting always. And that's one of the new, well-known ones. That. For if anybody's ever looked into spontaneous human combustion, this is definitely one that everybody's kind of
And by the way, even though that I am doubtful about this, I'm not mocking anyone who actually believes in this.
Right. Or if there is somebody who's had experiences in this, because there are some cases we're going to talk about survivors of this. It's just from what we know of things, you know what I mean? You're just saying from what you know of and what we've been taught, it's just hard for you to kind of wrap your mind around this. And that's why
Right, but I still
respect your
keep an
opinion.
open mind about things, because even though that I'm not fully convinced,
there's always a rare
that
chance
doesn't
of
mean
something.
that, I close my mind to it.
Right.
Because there's still always in there about, it's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
It could probably happen.
Right. I read something, there was a couple more that I was reading, and there was another one, I think it was in like 1964, kind of go with the year chronologically here a little bit. But it was, I think it was in October, but there was this woman, her name was Olga Worth Stevens, and she was 75 years old from what I was reading. And I did, like you guys know me, I love to try to see if I can find these in newspaper articles, but I didn't have a lot of luck with a bunch of these. But I guess she was like this former actress, and she was just in her car one day, and it was parked, but all of a sudden she just kind of burst into flames, and it ended up killing her, and before anybody could come to her aid, because there was people who did see the fire coming, or the smoke billowing out of her car. Right. And then when they tried to get to her, it was too late. She was already dead. But the firemen who were involved in the investigation of this one said that there was nothing in the car that could have started this fire. And actually that her car was undamaged. It didn't blow up or anything. Nothing happened to the car. Only she burst into flames and burnt up.
Wow.
So it's another one of those, like, how is this occurring? What's creating this?
Exactly.
Where was she in a certain spot? Did she, there's so many things. I wanted to find more into her. I wanted to see what she did, during her days before she died and stuff. But some of these things, you can't even find that, and it bums me out, because you want to go deeper into these stories, and you can only get so much out of them,
Right. That's true. In December of 1966 in Coudersport, Pennsylvania, a man by the name of John Irving Bentley, who was 92 years old at the time, had a few friends over the night before, and they all left about 9 o'clock that night. The next morning, which was the 5th of December, a Don Gosnell, who was a local meter reader, was in the basement checking the meter, and he smelled smoke.
Oh, that's that picture of that guy. I have that guy's foot picture.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll say this real quick for the viewers who are watching and who listen later on the podcast. In this photo next to the newspaper clipping, which they're totally two different stories, but the photo is of this person that Spooky is telling the story of right now. It's a real photo, so.
Okay, where was I? He was in the basement checking the meter, and he smelled smoke, and on the ground was a neat little pile of ash about 35 centimeters in height. Now, the floor underneath the ash was unmarked, and he looked up and he saw a hole about a foot-long square in the floorboards above him, and he was concerned, so he went upstairs, and he was calling out Bentley's name. Mm-hmm. And when he reached the bedroom, he noticed that it was smoky, and he went he followed the smoke and went into the bathroom, and he found Bentley's cremated remains in the bathroom. Mm-hmm. The only thing that was left to identify him was the lower half of his right leg with the slipper still on it. The rest of his body had just been reduced to a pile of ashes on the floor in the basement below. Now, his walker lay across the hole on the floor that was generated by this fire. Mm-hmm. And the rubber tips on the walker were still intact. And the nearby bathtub was hardly scorched. And Gosnell ran from the building to get help. And the coroner was kind of perplexed about this, and he could only record a verdict of death by asphyxiation and 90% burning of the body.
Yeah, it's just so you guys know, this guy who came into the meter guy, Don, he always had permission from years before, because Bentley had a disability, you know what I mean? And he couldn't go up and down stairs and really move around a whole lot. So right. This guy had already had permission from him from years before, so he would always just let himself in to the basement whenever he needed to go check the meters and stuff. And I recall reading, when I read this one, that he actually noticed the light blue smoke. And then he also said that he said like the smoke, it smelled kind of like sweet. And he said it kind of reminded him of like starting up a new oil burner for like the central heating system.
Yeah.
And that was his words. But he's not the only one who mentions about in these stories that we were researching and reading about, even with for the deceased people to the survivor ones. They all tend to say that the smoke has that same sweet smelling aroma, which I find is kind of interesting.
I don't want to get too graphic here, but it does. Burned human flesh does have a sweet smell to it, and once you smell it, you never forget it.
Well, the body has its own smell to it, but I'm saying,
Right. Right.
But I'm just saying that not everybody has that same smell. They're saying in these cases, this seemed to have a different type of smell than what you're used to smelling when, not that everybody knows this, but I'm saying
Yeah.
those who work in funeral homes or, or rescuers and stuff happen to know the smell.
Right. On September 15th, 1982, Jeannie Saffin, and I found the case of Jeannie Saffin very interesting because someone actually witnessed her combustion.
Mm-hmm.
Jeannie was 61 years old when she died, and she had the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Now, according to her father, who was 82 at the time, he and Jeannie were both sitting in the kitchen when he saw this bright surge of light out of the corner of his eye. So he turned to ask his daughter if she had seen it. And when he turned his head to look at her, she was on fire. But she just sat still with her hands in her lap. And he yanked her over to the sink to try to put her out. And, of course, the fire disfigured his hands in the process. Now, Jeannie suffered full-thickness burns on her face, her hands, and her abdomen. And this means that the flesh was burned off down to the subcutaneous fat. That layer of fat that's just underneath your skin. I never could pronounce that. Her hands and her face were pretty much destroyed. And she laid in a coma, and she died 8 days later. And her father stated that she gave no indication of even being aware of being on fire or of being in any pain.
Well, with this one, I think it's kind of interesting as well, too, because there was other people around, and that's what kind of made me wonder, I don't know, like, what's going on exactly 100%. It just drives me nuts because you want to be there. You want to be able to be in the investigation. You wish you could get your hands on more documentation and stuff because it's just like you're only getting these tidbits. And I just know there has to be a whole lot more to this. And, a lot of these cases do have similarities with people being older or people having similar type of lifestyles, and, a lot of them are happening kind of in fall. So be careful in the fall, guys. You might spontaneous combust. But no, I think this one's kind of interesting,
This is, I don't know what you found, but this was the only one I found where there was actually a witness to this.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently when she burst into flames, it was like this huge flash. Because her father did mention that out of the corner of his eye, he saw this flash. He said it was just a bright surge of light.
It makes me think of, like, static electricity. Because you know how it gives off that same blue arc and stuff? And there are some cases I'm going to be talking about later where you have that same blue flash, a surge of light. And and when I was reading some of these stories and we wrote up some of the cases, it got me to thinking about different things, and I'm going to kind of banter about those theories a little bit after our break.
I found it also interesting too that he said that she just absolutely gave no indication of even being aware of being on fire, and she didn't appear to be in any pain. So I wonder if this process happened so quickly that by the time you start to feel something, you're gone.
Right, with all the ones that we're talking about. Maybe it goes so quick. Like something happens within the body. If these are real, okay, We're not here to make you guys believe one way or the other, okay? But we're just bantering. It's entertainment. But maybe you're right. Maybe these things, something happens so quickly in the body where the person doesn't even really feel anything either, you know? I'd hope so anyway.
Right.
I don't know, but I do find it fascinating that he did see that burst of flash. It makes me want to know what the heck it was he saw.
Yeah, it was. To me, it reminded me of lightning striking.
Yeah. Oh man, stinking Alex Jones. You know, when we were cruising around the net looking for things, of course Alex Jones got his hands in everything. But him and his dad's theory is, well, everybody who spontaneously combusts is because it's lightning, because you know lightning comes from the ground. So he's like, everybody's just burst into flames because he got hit by lightning. But you know what? There are cases out there where people...
I've never heard of lightning coming up through the floorboards of a house before.
Well, if you're outside, you know what I mean? But you also heard of the lightning bolts, you know how they come in sometimes through the house? Because, you know, we actually have a story that happened in our family when it comes to the lightning bolts and stuff like that. But, you know, because I don't even know how many greats it is, but I think it was my grandma's uncle or whatever. They're in this farmhouse, and he was sitting in an old rocker, because, you know, back then they had everything by dang it, what do you call those lights? Kerosene lamps or whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're all chilling. They got the fireplace, and he's sitting in the rocker chair, and this ball of light came out of the fireplace. And this is probably more paranormal, but who knows? Maybe it came out of the fireplace. It circled around his rocking chair, and then it went out the window. It was the weirdest thing. And then he died, like, not that long after. And this is true. This really happened in our family. But that's like one of those lightning ball things that they're always telling the story about, those type of things. But you know, there's reports of people who actually are hit by lightning and they didn't spontaneously combust or turn into ash. So I don't buy, you know, because Alex Jones is like, this is all it is. It's just lightning, and that's why these people are spontaneously combusting. And I'm like, dude, there's a lot of people who get hit by lightning and they ain't dead. They're probably walking around either a little smarter or a little dimmer, but, you know, they didn't spontaneously combust. I don't think these match that. I don't think lightning caused these cases that we've read so far.
Well, it seems to me that you would have to be out in the open for that to happen, because I personally know of 2 cases of hunters being struck by lightning. So it just seems to me that for it to be considered lightning, that that you would just absolutely have to be out in the open. I have just never heard of it coming up through the floorboards before.
Well, but you're not saying that.
Have you ever seen lightning strike a tree? It damages that tree. For lightning to come up through your floorboard, it would have to explode those boards.
Yeah, but I just want to clarify for anybody who's listening. You're not saying that lightning doesn't come from the ground up. You're just saying you don't believe that lightning came to the bottom of these people's houses and blew these people up.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not saying that lightning doesn't come from the ground up. I've always been told that it does. What I'm saying is I don't believe it's coming up through the house, through the floorboards. Because it would leave damage. And like I said, if you have ever seen a tree that has been struck by lightning, that the lightning damages that tree.
Yeah. So, I mean, Alex Jones, like, this is all it is, and I know what it is, and no need to look anymore. And I'm like, yeah, see you later, Alex Jones. That's why I kept on looking, because we're going to bring in all different kind of theories that we can, you know what I mean? And we're not here to... We're going to bring in more plausible to the most insane things that you could have heard of why this happened, okay? Because, like we said, this show is for entertainment. But I don't know. I don't agree with that one. I know there's other cases of people claiming that they saw this ball of light flash before the person started smoking and or died, you know, from this or whatever. But do you want to take like a quick 2-minute break so I can go get something to drink real quick so I don't have a coughing fit? And
sure.
Then okay, thanks. For you guys listening, we're just going to take like a quick intermission. It's going to be like 2 minutes. And then we're going to come back and finish the second hour of the show and tell more stories and get into theories and everything else. So if you guys want to just get a drink or have a smoke or whatever, we'll be right back. So please stay with us. The show is not over. Thank you, everybody, for sharing us with others. and giving our show a like, and we'll be right back in 2 minutes. I just need water so I don't have a coughing fit. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary. I'm your host, Raven.
And your other host, Spooky.
Your other awesome host, Spooky's back too. But I never get to really say awesome when I re-announce you, so she kind of cut me off to re-announce her. I was going to say awesome. But tonight...
Sure you were.
Tonight is... Why you gotta be all jerky? Crack me up, man. I'm trying to be all serious. She's making me laugh all day today, so it's good to laugh. Laughing's good for the soul.
Yes, laughter is good medicine.
Right.
That's an old saying, but it's actually true.
Yes. If you have enough laughs in you...
So isn't booze, because after a while you don't care, you're sick.
Well, I was just going to say, if you laugh a lot, maybe you won't spontaneous combust, but if you drink booze, you might, because a lot of these people are known alcoholics.
Yep.
That seems to occur in these cases. But I was going to say, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Here's the second half of the show. We're going to continue on telling more stories of spontaneous human combustion that we came across, of deceased, and then we're going to go into, like, survivor stories that I found. And like we said, this is for entertainment, and we're just throwing stuff out there, and we may throw out some of the things that you guys are saying in chat, too, because you guys are making some interesting kind of just theories, And
right.
So reading that too, but I found one that happened in 1986, and I know people know this case too a lot. It's one of the more popular ones if you guys are always looking up this type of stuff, because there are people who are really serious about this, and they are trying to prove or disprove this 100%, and maybe one day scientists might figure it out. I don't know if it is or isn't, but there are people that's written in a lot of scientific journals. There's people who are doing papers on it. There's people who are who like have college classes on these things and everything else. But
and this, and like I said earlier, this is a topic and a so-called incident or affliction that has been talked about and accepted for hundreds of years.
yeah, but it's like some people are on the fence about it, or there's somebody on this side or that side as far as believing or
Right.
disbelieving. But I found a case that happened in 1986 in March. So it's like spring here. So it's still a little cold weather. So for all these. But this one happened in New York City at Crown Point. Now, this guy's his name was George Mott, and he was a 58-year-old retired fireman. Well, he was discovered in his bedroom by his son, Kendall. Because what happened was, well, Kendall came over to, visit his dad or whatever, and he arrived over at the house, and what he noticed, what was strange is when on his approach up the sidewalk or to the entry of the house, he said that the windows were kind of charred black. There was like a weird covering over the windows. And when he reached for the front door handle, he said that it was actually hot. So, of course, he was concerned, so he busted into the house, and he noticed that it was actually filled with smoke. So he's calling for his father, all over and just kind of looking throughout the house for him. And when he reached his bedroom, that's when he saw his body along with the mattress of the bed were both charred to ash. He said all that remained to kind of identify him was just his leg and just kind of pieces of bone, like the rib cage and stuff, and his skull. And I think this was another case where this was a shrunken skull too. And like we said, reviewer discretion, we'll probably talk about some things you guys might not like, or you might see a photo or whatever. But so he just discovered his dad, just in pieces. And he also found the skull. And he mentioned, or it was mentioned on different sites, that the fire actually didn't melt the TV set that was just across from the bed. Because you know how some people have the TV like right next to your bed?
Right.
And he also said it didn't ignite the oxygen tanks or the matches that were nearby. And everybody knows oxygen tanks, but it's like a freaking bomb. Sorry, Chipper.
Yes, they are. That's why they tell you not to smoke or
keep
have
a heat
open
source or
flames
anything like that,
near
yeah.
anyone who is or any place really, especially hospitals where oxygen is in use.
Right. Dang it. I lost my thought. Oh, but so, the TV didn't happen. Nothing happened to the TV, which was right next to the bed, or the oxygen tanks weren't even affected. There was even a set of matches that were like right there on the what do you call that? The bed table side? Nightstand, thank you. I got a cold. My brain's just like, what? But, many believe that this was a case for SHC. Where other kind of suggest that since he was like a smoker and he was a drinker, that he kind of probably set himself on fire, And a lot of the net stories said that the investigators suggested that the death was either caused by like this electrical arc that kind of shot out of an outlet and set fire to my... Okay, this is a big stretch to say right here. You got your little outlets around your room, right? So y'all better be careful. You better put little outlet plugs in there because these guys are saying electricity from the little plug-in outlets where you plug your stuff in decided to shoot out, and it shot across the room and hit him right in the bed and poof, set him on fire. Okay? That's one of the theories that investigators were kind of suggesting. And they also said maybe there was a gas leak. But there was no proof of a gas leak. Why didn't the whole house blow up? Okay, if there was a gas leak, everybody knows that
a gas leak is not going to affect one person in a nursing home. Mm-mm. Part of that nursing home is going to in a house, an apartment, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Part of that building is going to explode, if not the entire building.
Right, because you see people's garages blast off.
I saw something on the news here not too long ago where there was a gas line explosion, and this was a pretty good sized house, and it took about 90% of that house. It just exploded. So it's not going to just affect just one person.
Yeah. Sorry, just reading something. But you're right. And I just don't believe, and other people don't believe this either. It's just, they're just trying to ration it the best way they can. But I'm sorry, I don't think an outlet shot of strong enough, anything strong enough. Because there's people who stick stinking frickin' forks and knives and stuff
Kids are
in the
kids do
outlet.
that.
And you don't see them burst into flames.
Kids will stick stuff in an outlet, and sometimes nothing happens and sometimes they get shocked, but they don't burst into flames.
That's like, it's the same difference. You don't see little boys bursting into flames when they pee on the electric fence, because that happens to a lot of kids when they're younger. The older kids like, hey, I dare you to pee on the fence, or I'll pay you $1 if you pee on the electric fence, and you'll get knocked to the ground, buddy. It's the same type of arc. It's the same kind of arc that's gonna hit you. You know what I'm saying?
Now, I have to say something about that. I saw a drunk pee on an electric fence one time, and that's the first time I ever saw fire walk up a stream of urine.
But he didn't burst into flame. He was
He
full
didn't
of
burst
booze.
into flames. He got knocked back about 10 feet. Probably full more than that.
There's more to this story, but I know why you're holding it back. But but this guy, that guy was full of alcohol. If this was an arc thing, like they're trying to say, he would have bursted up and burnt into flames too, though. You know what I mean? So I don't find that plausible, okay? As far as why this poor man, and we're not making fun of the people who died or their family here. We're just kind of like whatever to the investigators. This is not a good enough, just stamp it off and say that's just it. But, if, I don't know, if it was like a gas leak, why didn't the oxygen tanks blow up and cause even a bigger mess? Why was it only him and the bed affected, but the TV's not affected? The oxygen tanks didn't blow up. I mean, nothing was really askew, really, except for his bed and him, and the windows had the soot on it, you know what I'm saying? And the door handle was hot, and there was smoke in the house. Obviously, when he came, this just occurred, because there was still smoke.
It sounds like it. It sounds like this was something
still
that
really
had just...
hot.
Yeah, something that had just happened.
Right, and I feel bad for this, for the guy, and just, if anybody who has to see this type of things, But to me, this is another bizarre case. And they talk about, well, this is why this is an SHC, because his family disputes that they do believe, due to, the localized damage, that George Mott was a victim of this spontaneous human combustion. I mean, we don't know if it's like this instant thing, because, well, except for that Jenny suffered, because you did say that she did have somebody there who saw it happen, but...
Right.
So I don't know. I don't think this explode like a big bomb.
It just
there's like a process to this.
Their explanation just doesn't sit right with me. Mm-hmm. Okay, he's on oxygen, but he was a smoker. Mm-hmm. Well, it's. I knew this guy that my sister knew him better than I did, but I knew this guy. He was disabled and he was on oxygen. And he was a smoker, and every time you'd go visit him, he'd take that oxygen mask and pull it up. Wouldn't even turn the oxygen off and smoke a cigarette. And you'd always stand in the doorway because you're afraid something would happen. If his oxygen tanks had exploded, it would have at least damaged the room he was in. There'd be cracks in the wall and stuff. It'd just be a typical explosion. And arcs coming out of electrical outlets, I don't buy that at all.
Well, Leonard...
I just find that... I find that actually more harder to believe than SHC.
Exactly. And, Leonard made a point. He was talking about people who are seriously looking into SHC. Like we said, this is more for entertainment, but we're just kind of going to bring in theories that seem more plausible to the downright crazy of what people are saying, you know what I mean? But he was talking about, how if they're into this, they should look in and read about with Tesla, and they'll figure out more and understanding about spontaneous human combustion. And him and Rusty were talking about, like with Tesla's death ray and all that kind of stuff too. But like I said, there is some really fascinating banter that goes on in forums when it comes to spontaneous human combustion. and the different things that people are really really looking into and talking about, and they kind of bring A to Z when it really comes to this, And
Yeah.
so, we're not scientists, you guys, but we're just doing our best to kind of just throw a little bit of everything out there with these stories and stuff. And, we'll try to mention some of the banter that's going on in chat here too. But, I think this one too is one of those that make me think that if SHC is real, this is one of those ones that
would
do
be the
point to
typical
it.
case of it.
Yeah, because it's following a pattern of similar ones that we're reading.
Exactly. August 24th in 1998 in Sydney, Australia. Now, this one is not that old. Agnes Phillips, who was an elderly lady and had Alzheimer's, and she lived in a nursing home. Now, she was out with her, on an outing with her daughter, Jackie Park, one afternoon, and she became real tired, and she fell asleep in the car.
Well, that's normal.
Right.
When you're elderly, because she's...
Exactly. Well, her daughter needed to run an errand, so she parked the car, and she ran into a store, and, she left her mom in the car because her mom was asleep. And she thought that maybe her mom needed the rest. But shortly after, she looked out the store window, and she noticed smoke coming from her car, and then an explosion of flames, and her car just became engulfed. And a person nearby broke into the car and grabbed her mother out of the car and put out the flames, and her mother muttered, "It's too hot."
Yeah, I think she was like, "It's too hot, it's too hot," when the person was trying to put it out. And of course, they just assumed it was the fire that she had on her, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, Agnes had several severe burns across her chest, her stomach, her arms, and her legs, and she died a week later in the hospital. Now, this fire inspector, I think his name was Donald Walsh, he claimed that he could not determine where the fire had originated since the car had not been running. And there was no trace of any liquid accelerants. There was no faulty wiring in the car.
Sorry.
And neither Agnes or her daughter smoked.
Right.
Now, Inspector Walsh ruled out spontaneous human combustion, and he believed that the fire was the result of the wick effect. And he totally disregarded the fact that this process takes a matter of hours to burn a human body.
Right.
Now, for those of you who don't know, the wick effect is like if someone is sleeping and they're smoking and they're smoking and they fall asleep and they drop their cigarette and it catches the bedding on fire and then the clothes on fire and then the person on fire. That's what they are referring to as the wick effect. Now, and like I said, it takes a matter of hours to burn a human body. Now, the documentation in this case reveals that Agnes's body was severely burned within a matter of minutes. So that it essentially eliminated any possibility of this being caused by a wick effect. So it really makes her a likely candidate for a true spontaneous combustion case in modern times. Agnes Phillips, I keep wanting to call her Phyllis. Agnes Phillips, she mysteriously caught fire while she was left unattended inside her daughter's car. And several people witnessed this event.
Well, exactly. Okay, because it's just a mom and daughter outing. It's a normal thing that they've done. She picks her mom up from the nursing home, and they're out and about, and her mom's elderly, so, you get a little tired running about. So she just wanted to take rest a little bit, in the car. But who knows? Maybe there was something going on within her body that was creating her to feel fatigued. Maybe there was something going on with this process.
And I do find it kind of hard to believe, too, that she was sitting out in a hot sun. For people who don't know, the seasons in Australia are completely opposite of ours.
Yeah,
while we're going into spring, they're going into winter.
Right, so August would be more of a...
Yeah, their Christmas comes in the summertime. So August would be springtime over there.
Right, see, a lot of these stories, again, are in a colder time. Spring and fall. Again, I'm starting to notice that pattern, too. So this is interesting, too, because I'm starting to notice with the stories that you're kind of mentioning and the things that I'm mentioning, there seems to be, it's a colder weather as well. But, she was just chilling in the car, and then,
she was actually sleeping.
Yeah, resting, and then the daughter looked out and she saw smoke coming out, but there was people walking by who noticed smoke coming out of the car, and that's why that guy got there quick enough to race out and try to help this woman,
Right.
from what was occurring. And I think I actually saw that case on some type of like unsolved mystery type of show thing. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I do recall this story as well. And I
think it's interesting, though, that they never stated which side of the car, the driver's side or the passenger side, which sustained the most damage.
Oh, But there might be somewhere on a different, you read a couple, and maybe they're on, somebody else may have knows a little bit more information. Like you said, we tried our best to dig out as much as we could to try to, and even find newspaper clippings. Like, I found some of them, but I couldn't find all of these on these ones. And it's just like, I really wish there was a little bit more written up on these things, to find out, well, what were they doing days before? Were they ever having any other odd, weird health symptoms that doctors didn't really know, or may have classified it as, whatever? Because, fibromyalgia is one of those huge things that they just label everybody under because it has such a wide variety of symptoms for it, you know what I mean? Maybe SHC, maybe these people, these stories, this is just things we're throwing out. We're not saying it factual. This is all just for entertainment, okay? We're not scientists, but maybe these cases, maybe these people all had maybe similar type of health issues, and maybe there's a pattern to a lot of this, if this is real, and it makes you wonder too, all these different things. It's like, that's why you want to be able to dig into this deeper and to find more things, but you're just having such a hard time to get so past because everybody seems to be regurgitating the same things when you're finding the stories, but there isn't a whole lot more. So that's why people are taking to forums and just really coming together as a group. And we're going to have these references in the YouTube link after the show tonight. When I go and save it, I'll put all the references to all the different places we were finding. Just like, with the science journals, I found magazine, science articles, college articles, all these different things. And we're kind of got to put it all there for you guys to go and read it for yourself, too. But, you're speaking of Jenny Saffin case. And I did find some more reports of people who lived to tell their stories of surviving what people call SHC, And, one of them, I think one of the first earlier ones that I found happened in 1932. Now, this again was in January. So this is, again, fall.
Wintertime.
Yes. So this is, I guess.
Well, if it's in the United States, it's wintertime.
Well, it was in North Carolina. And now her name was Mrs. Charles Williamson. And, well, basically one morning she just kind of suddenly burst into flames. And is what the story was. But both her daughter and her husband were there with her when this occurred. What happened was, all of a sudden, just flames, she was smoking, and then flames just started to engulf on her on her dress. Well, the daughter and the husband both got up and tore the dress off with their bare hands, and she wasn't anywhere near any type of flammable type of substances, and for any of this flame to occur, she wasn't cooking, she wasn't near any open flames, she wasn't playing with chemicals, she was just chilling, and then poof, and then of course they reacted quickly because their mom, his wife and the mom's on fire. They're like, what the frick, so they run there, they strip her off her clothing, and this is where it starts to get weird, okay? Not long after, a pair of his pants caught on fire while hanging in a closet nearby. And also the bed curtains burst into flames. That it was in a room that wasn't even occupied by anybody at the time. So flames started to burst off into other rooms. So although the house was inspected by different investigators and stuff, they said there was, and it was even inspected by the gas and the electrical companies and stuff. And they had arson experts, and the police and everybody was there. And nobody could come up or find any logical explanation. Sorry, I can't talk next to my cold. I'm plugged up. For why these fires suddenly started. You know, they couldn't describe why did the other room in the closet and the curtain and the clothing start on fire as around the same time when she bursted into flames. You know,
Wow.
the family described that this flame was that like a bluish jet-like ball. You know, remember that same thing with Jenny?
Yeah.
That same thing. These people are seeing this bluish light, and it was and it was just adjacent to the objects that, you know, where she was. Everything around her wasn't affected. You know, nothing else caught on fire except for the pants and the shirt, but they weren't even in that room, or the pants and the curtain, excuse me, which is in a different room. So they don't even know what caused that. But there was no reason for her to burst into flames. There was nothing around her. She wasn't around open fire. She wasn't touching or doing anything chemicals. They just saw that blue light again, and then all of a sudden she was smoking and caught on fire. But she survived.
That's interesting that not only did she catch on fire, but other objects that weren't even near her caught on fire.
Right, which I'm going to kind of describe some theories that people were having later with maybe it being something of paranormal nature too, but I'll say that a little bit later when we're talking more, because there's another case I want to kind of talk about that'll bring me into a theory that people are always talking about too. But this is a person who survived, and not only did she survive, there was two other people who witnessed this that occurred. But again, they're talking about this bluish light seen first, and then
Right.
smoke and fire.
Hmm.
But they had
That's
all these
interesting.
investigators come in, and arson experts and everybody else, and it wasn't a gas leak. There was no electrical wiring issue. There was nothing. Nobody can figure out why this one happened. I'm sure she's dead now because it happened in 1932. I'm sure she was probably in her 20s or her 30s. You know, so by now I'm sure she's passed on. You know what I mean? But her name was Miss Charles Williamson, if somebody wants to look it up. But we'll have all the names and stuff in description later for you guys to investigate more of this if you want.
In December of 1980 in Cheshire, England, a Susan Motteshead was in her kitchen one morning in her pajamas when her daughter screamed that her mother's back was on fire. And when Susan looked, she said that she all of a sudden saw this whoosh of a yellowish blue flames all over her, and then they went out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, neither her body nor her hair were burned or singed, and when the fire department arrived, they tried to understand what had occurred, and once changed, she offered them her flame-resistant pajamas, and unsuccessfully, they couldn't create the same effect. Now, was she a survivor of SHC or just a weird blue static discharge of sorts like some seem to think?
Mm-hmm.
But this was one where she actually did burst into flames, and then they just went out. And she wasn't hurt. She wasn't burned. Her hair wasn't singed.
Yeah, I think
She
her
just
hair was...
caught on fire.
Yes, her hair was wet. She was just in the shower not that long beforehand. I remember this story too, and so her hair was still wet and stuff. So I think it was still wet after she poofed into fire. This is another one that I find fascinating. This is a survivor. But look again, it's December.
Yeah.
So these are all, a lot of these are like spring and fall. So it's interesting. And Rob made a comment about, I think it was Rob. I apologize if I read the name wrong when because I can't keep up with chat sometimes. But they were talking about a lot of this science channels and stuff. They were talking about how a lot of these people report having migraine headaches, and they suffer from headaches and stuff too. And that maybe that could be like a trigger or something. I think I read part of his thing right. It's hard to keep everything up while we're doing our stuff, but so that's interesting too. If these, because remember we're talking about maybe there's like a medical health thing that's related with all these people too. But again, you got that bluish spark again, and these are people talking about it. But her pajamas, weren't, like you said, where they were flame resistant. Is that what you're saying?
Her mother told her that her back was on fire, and she didn't even know it.
No, her daughter told the mom her back was on fire.
Right. Sorry. Excuse me.
That's okay. I'm getting confused. But this is one of those ones again that I find is interesting. It's, and I'm sure she's still around, so you guys could probably, this would be neat. It's like they should have all these survivors, if these are real stories, why not have them all come together and do like a documentary and tell all their life, tell their stories, because, maybe they could say of what they were feeling like days before to minutes before. Was she feeling funny? Did she have a headache? Or, did she start feel hot from the inside out? Did she have a cold? What's creating this stuff? You know what I mean? But I found another interesting one where it kind of goes with what you guys were saying. In 1985, this was in September, and her name was Debbie Clark. Well, Debbie Clark, she wasn't even home, okay? She was actually walking home. And this is kind of a strange one, okay? When she was walking home, she said she began to notice flashes of blue lights as she was walking. So every step she took, there would be like this blue flash of light. And according to the site I was reading, this is kind of like what her words were. It was saying that this is what she was saying. It was her that the light was coming from, and as she walked up her driveway, every step she placed would illuminate. So it was like bursting light enough to create even, lighting up the area, And she said as she walked into the yard, she began to go into circles because she was just fascinated that this light was emitting from her body, and she just was in awe of it. So then she was just kind of doing circles in the yard and just like, wow, this is amazing. And then she yelled for her mom, who was in the house. She's like, come out, look, what the heck, what's going on? It's bizarre. And her brother, he came to the door and he looked out and he yelled for their mom. And her mom came and began to yell for Debbie to quickly come to her. And she grabbed Debbie and she tore off her shoes and everything, was ripping off her clothes. And she ran her upstairs and basically threw her in the bathtub and turned on the shower and stuff. And while she was doing it, all these blue flashes just kept happening the whole entire time. So, because she ran, the girl's just flashing the whole time. She's dragging her upstairs. She's still flashing. She's pulling off her clothing. She's still flashing. She throws her into the shower to try to think maybe this will stop this. She didn't know what was going on. And the brother's like, oh, this is like, spontaneous combustion. You're going to die, whatever, stupid joking, But he said this blue light flashes just came from Debbie. They came from her body. And they think maybe this might have been the beginning stages of possibly spontaneous human combustion. I mean, they don't know. They don't really know what this was. And maybe because of the mom's fast reaction and throwing her in the shower, it may have saved her life. I have no idea.
It may have.
But, I mean, she did make a comment that she'd often had issues with, this is in general, Debbie was saying she always had issues with electrical things when she was near them. And they would always just break down or blow up. So this is going to go with something I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, about maybe it has to do with more paranormal and your mind powers and stuff. But this girl, anytime she's around electrical items and stuff, and there's people who do this, they tend to drain batteries. Like, don't you wear like a watch? You have to wear a special watch because anytime you wear different watches, you just, the battery, you just suck the energy out of things.
I just suck the energy right out of them.
Yeah.
They don't work on my wrist. Even the ones that you wind with no battery, they just stop. I have to wear there's only 2 brands of watches that I can wear that don't do that. And it's Pulsar and Bulova, which by the way are both expensive watches.
Yeah, but you're not the only one. There's other people who do have that occur to them too. You know what I mean? And so I find it fascinating, but this woman, she's probably a woman now, she's probably in her teenage years at this time because it was 1985. She's walking home. I'm sure she was a teenager, if I remember right. But, anything she goes around, it keeps messing up. But I find this one fascinating because it's not just her, but her brother and her mother, and who knows who was watching her walk down the street.
Well, if she had problems with electrical things, I don't think this is SHC. I think this might be something else.
Yes, about maybe something paranormal, or not paranormal as far as I mean.
Not paranormal.
I meant
necessarily,
but I meant like the power of the mind or the human body and stuff. And we're going to kind of banter about that a little bit with different theories that we're going to say. But I just thought this was another interesting case. But
yeah, it's very interesting.
But wait a minute, it might be because how do you know these other people didn't have? Maybe they affected things too around them, but it's got that blue ball of light again because there's other cases where people say they saw that light and then they bursted into flames. And since her mom reacted so quickly in putting her in the shower, that's why it didn't continue forward in it. Maybe. We don't know. These are just things we're throwing out for the heck of it, but.
In June of 1995 in Vermont, Frank Baker is a survivor of what was called partial spontaneous combustion. It took place at Frank's residence while he was visiting with his good friend, Pete Willie. Now, Frank and Pete were preparing for a day of fishing, and suddenly that's when things began to go wrong. Half of Frank's body began to heat up and started on fire. Now, both men panicked and they quickly tried to extinguish the flames on Baker's body, and once out, Pete rushed Frank to the doctors. Now, according to Frank, he stated that the doctors told him that this burn was from the inside out. And Frank openly spoke about his incident in a documentary and stated that he wasn't near any flames or heat source, no smoking, no microwaves. They were not drinking, and the only heat source he could think of was across the room with the natural sunlight coming through a curtain. Pete and Frank were just sitting on the couch talking when he suddenly felt heat coming from his body, and then he saw that his clothes were in flames. True story? Well, to Frank and Pete, they claimed it really happened.
Right, and there's a documentary of him actually talking of his events, and I'm going to post the link in.
I think I saw that.
Yeah, I'm going to post the link in our YouTube description later after we're done talking tonight, so you guys can go and watch him tell his own story, but we don't know. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, that guy's full of BS, it's not real. And then there are other people who will be like, who are we to say this did or didn't happen? We weren't there, we didn't see it. But, there's a lot of weird things that happen to people that we don't know. Like you've seen Bigfoot. I mean, and other people have paranormal experiences and stuff. Who are we to judge to say something did or did not occur, But that's another one I find interesting for a survivor case, too. And he's still around, and he is blogging. He is putting his thing out there. So you guys can probably get in contact with that guy and do talk to him and figure out, But
could be. His name is Frank Baker.
Right. I found another survivor case. And this one I remember because I did see this on Unsolved Mysteries show. I don't know, late at night, because you know how they play older stuff on cable and stuff. But this case happened in 1996 in February, and it was in Ohio, Stowe, Ohio, and her name was Kay Fletcher. Well, one morning Kay Fletcher was having breakfast with her husband Mike on February 11th, I guess, exact date, when she suddenly saw smoke billowing up from when they saw smoke billowing up from the back of her sweater, and she thought it was on fire, so she took it off, and her husband was kind of checking her back, and he said that there was this really large red spot on her skin, and he said that the smoke was so thick that they actually had to open up the kitchen window to let the smoke dissipate. But they were just sitting at the table eating. They weren't cooking. She wasn't playing with chemicals. They weren't even doing anything, just eating their breakfast. And all of a sudden, this thick smoke started coming out from her backside and her clothing, and, he ripped it off her to help her. And they saw this huge red burn mark. The skin was blistering. So there's no really apparent cause for this smoke, but her husband, at one time, he worked in a crematorium.
Crematorium.
Thank you. And he said that smoke smelled like burning flesh, which her skin was burning because she had this huge burn mark. And so they don't even know how that happened. And you can actually watch that story on YouTube. I think they have the Unsolved Mystery thing. I'll put it in the link too in our description. But she is another one of a supposedly what they consider their coining of a survivor of SHC. You know, because she's having the same pattern that happened. Except for they didn't see a blue flash of light on hers. But she just started smoking and whatever. You know what? Have you ever seen the movie Firestarter? With Drew Barrymore and David Keith in it? Because, they're always playing old stuff or whatever. But a lot of these...
I think it came out in the 80s. The early 80s, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it more than once. It was one of Stephen King's novels.
Right. Yeah, Stephen King has some great stories. But
yeah, I love Stephen King.
Yeah, but what I was kind of thinking and what I was going to say before, and a lot of people I think have bantered a little bit about this too, but I don't know. I mean, what if some of these cases are, that are labeled as SHC, but maybe what if they're just like extreme rare cases of pyrokinesis?
For those of you who might not know, pyrokinesis is an alleged psychic ability where a person can create and control fire with their mind by manipulating an object's atoms to increase its thermal energy until it ignites. Did you know, though, that Stephen King was the first person to coin the word pyrokinesis?
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, people were always talking about it, but I don't think it was called pyrokinesis at the time. But I think he was the kind of one who kind of threw it out when he was writing these stories and the movies and stuff. And then it kind of just, they use the word. But, here's my thing. Because there's been really many stories kind of written about it, as well as, movies of, like, people possessing, like, these abilities to do things with their mind. And so I was kind of looking around because when I was reading these survivor things and a little bit of everything else, it kind of made my mind just kind of think about different things. Because like we said, we're just going to throw, everything out there to maybe plausible to down out, just like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? Because it's for entertainment. But when I was kind of digging around, I found this story, and it's true, but it happened in the 19th century. There was this guy, his name was A. William Underwood. Now, he was like this 27-year-old African-American from Pawpaw, Michigan, and he was actually this really popular celebrity back in the day because he was actually known for his abilities, or alleged abilities, to set items on fire with his mind. That's what they were saying. And it was actually even written about in the Michigan Medical News in like 1882 by this Dr. L.C. Woodman. And this guy who was observing him actually believed, because he was like observing him for like a long time and he was studying this man, and that he actually believed that this Underwood had this ability to somehow use the electricity in the nervous system to generate fire. Now, of course, at that time there was many scientists and I can't even talk anymore tonight, magicians that kind of like speculated that this guy was actually just using some kind of form of ignition element to kind of achieve his tricks, like sulfur or something, you know what I mean? But, many talked about this guy's abilities in several medical and scientific journals, including the Scientific American, which was first published in 1845 as a 4-page weekly newspaper, and I think that magazine's still around today. But supposedly there have been other known reports of this occurring over the years too, because I found something in 2011. If it's real or not, I don't know. We throw it out there just for, because who knows what causes these things. But it was in 2011 in the Philippines. There was news reports of a 3-year-old possessing the ability to predict and kind of produce fire, and she drew in like a bunch of curious seekers. And this was like in the Philippines and like the central Philippines. And these people were coming and they claimed to have actually witnessed her abilities by seeing clothing, household items in the bedroom, pillows, papers, just things suddenly ignite. And how it was igniting is she would just speak the word of something for some said item to burn, and it would. And there was a lot of people who witnessed this happen. There was another story that I read that occurred in like 2012 where a 11-year-old girl in Vietnam supposedly possessed this ability, as well, where she was just she caught a house on fire and other objects in the house too. So here's just a thought that people are bantering about on the internet for maybe this might be why some of these cases are occurring, because people are talking about everything out there, because this is just, some unknown thing, and there's so many unknown things that happen on this planet if this is occurring, so they're saying, like, what if some of these cases of SHC, and this is all just fun what we're doing tonight, just entertainment, and maybe it's that, maybe this person somehow unintentionally triggered something within their own system to start like a blaze or a combustion from within their own body, I don't know. I mean, because, of course, I just want to say for those who are listening now and who are going to be listening later on in a podcast, this was a suggestion that was brought to us a while back as far as the topic goes.
Right.
And I know this is kind of a tad off topic, but it's not at the same point, you know what I mean? Because if we're going to discuss the possibilities of SHC, why not speculate on different theories of what might trigger it? Because, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think a person can or have the ability to do such a feat? Create fire with their mind using their energy? Because remember that Debbie Clark that I was talking about above, she was having this blue energy coming from within her body, and every item that she came around that was electrical, she seemed to fry it out, so who knows? Maybe somebody has some type of psychic ability and they just don't know how to control it, and maybe they burnt themselves. I don't know. There's supposedly these cases of, like I just read off of.
I don't know. There are cases of people who claim to be able to put energy into other people. There are people who can, like me with the watches.
Yeah.
I just suck the energy right out of those batteries.
Yeah, I think some people, and then there's other people who,
Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Okay, that is something that has been linked to young girls and some young guys.
Right. But that doesn't. What I'm saying is.
That's kind of like an energy being thrown out there into the open.
Right.
And then there are people that claim that they can take the energy out of other people. I don't know.
Right, but there's so many different things that occur, and people do.
That would have to be a
things.
very, 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 very strong energy to do that.
Right, but if
and
these
I
cases,
just don't know.
Well, yeah, we're just throwing out
anybody
randomness.
that could even do that. The energy that it would take to do that would have to be ginormous.
Well, right, but I'm saying just like SHC, there's people who are being studied with their mind abilities too. That's another show too in itself, because the government brought a bunch of people in, was trying to teach them to do telepathy and move objects with their mind, blah 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 blah, all these other things. Well, these are things that people are talking about when you're on the forums when it comes with SHC. Maybe like the movie Firestarter with pyrokinesis, and there's these stories out there of supposedly these people having the ability to change things and create them to heat up and then start on fire. So maybe some of these cases, we're not saying this is one way or the other, we're just throwing things out there for fun, could have been created by that. And when I was reading all this stuff, because like everything's got a big spider web effect, when it comes to paranormal and all that other stuff, everybody knows when you start digging, you get pulled into something else, and then it leads you into a whole bunch of stuff. But
I know, you start researching a subject, and the next thing you know, it leads here, it leads there, and the next thing you know, there's all kinds of different areas shooting off of this one subject.
Well, there was this woman. Her name was Carol Compton, and she was this nanny in Italy who many accused her of being a witch because they thought she possessed the psychic ability to just, and she just didn't know it or had it under control. But there was 5 different fires that occurred in 23 days. And as well as other things. I mean, there was some type of poltergeist type of activity going on and stuff too, when she was in these 2 homes. But she was brought to trial and actually accused of being a witch that could start fires just by her mere thought and/or attention, i.e. pyrokinesis. Now, she worked with different families, but both places that she worked at, fires just spontaneously occurred when the last fire broke out where she was working. And since the police were aware of the random fires that happened at the first family home that she worked at, they basically arrested her, and she was locked up for like 16 months, and as she waited trial. And at that point, she was being accused of attempted murder because one of the fires occurred in the bedroom of the 3-year-old's room of the family that she was now just working for. But there was also strange other paranormal activity occurring at that time there too, just after she arrived. But anyways, they arrested her, and she sat in jail for like 16 months until 1983 when they found her not guilty of attempted murder. But they did charge her for like arson and attempted arson. But since she'd already spent like 16 months in jail,
right,
they kind of just released her. But there was never really any evidence that that actually proved that she was behind any of these strange occurrences and/or fires that occurred in both of the family homes. But many people to this day think that she was just either like a victim of paranormal activity, while other people think that she actually had possessed pyrokinesis and she unknowingly set fire with her own mind. So again, this is stories of what I'm finding about people supposedly having this ability. So I don't know, maybe some of these SHC things, maybe
she was just a victim of bad luck.
Oh yeah, too. I know, but I'm just trying to throw out there what people are talking about when it comes to this, and we're not here to prove or disprove anything. It's just for entertainment. But when I was reading all this stuff, it re-triggered something in my own mind and it reminded me of something that happened to me. And this is, okay, I was younger and I was hanging out with this one guy one night, and we were just friends. And he loves stuff like the shows we do. He was always into the paranormal and all the different things that we're always talking about. And, well, one time we were hanging out, and he drove me home, and he's like, hey, I want to, I don't know. He's like, hey, I want to show you something. And not show you something funny, ha ha, you know what I mean, like sexual or nothing weird like that. Yeah, I didn't mean like that, but he was just like, hey, he took my arm, he put it out, and he said, okay, I want you to open the palm of your hand, and he said, I want you to just watch your vein on the inside of my arm. He said, just stare right here first and just watch. He said, don't take your eyes away, just watch right here. And I was like, okay, whatever. So he closed his eyes. And he was focusing. And then he took his index finger and he touched the middle of my open palm. And all of a sudden, this blue light went up my vein. And it started from my wrist and it went all the way up my vein to my arm. And I was just like, it was this really bright bluish color. It was like the inside of my arm had electricity going through it. And I was like, what, Ooh. The mother trucker? I'm like, no freaking way, right? But he sent this surge of energy up my vein. It was like one of the coolest things I ever saw. And I was like, how the frick did you do that? That's just insane. And so this is why I know that the human body and the soul and the spirit and all the interesting things that occur on this planet, you don't really know. And we're all conditioned or trained to believe so many things are, like this can't happen or this can't happen or this person can't do this or whatever these things that happen to people can't happen. But yet it's happening. There are things that are occurring. So I don't know. I mean, I have seen people do some fascinating things with their minds. Like you said, people sending healing energy, like with Reiki and all the different things. There's people who just read people's minds. And I'm not talking about cold reading where you already know something. I'm like straight up a stranger and you read them and you can tell them. It just happens to a lot of people. So it's kind of why I had this random thought, and I think other people had this thought too, about pyrokinesis being a possibility of this supposed reported cases of SHC. Maybe if these were, I don't know if these reports are real or not, but a lot of them these people say that they are, but maybe these people are just somehow a victim of their own uncontrolled psychic abilities, and thus creating the right component to kind of like heat up in their bodies from the inside out. Kind of like with that case of K.Y. Fletcher, like we mentioned earlier, and she started to feel warm and had the red marks on her skin. Now, I'm not saying that she is or that's what it was. It's just random thoughts that people are having when it comes to this. And this is, like I said, it's just all entertainment banter, not scientifically proven facts that we're doing here, But, I mean, maybe that might be an idea of why this is occurring.
Well, there possibly could be something to that, because it's like, okay, like on Facebook, for instance, every once in a while you see somebody on there and they say, please send positive energy, my sister, my mother, whoever, is ill or whatever. Mm-hmm. And people will send positive energy that way. Mm-hmm. These Reiki healers.
Reiki, yeah.
Ricky, Ricky, whatever his name is, he will, they use energy for this healing. Mm-hmm. And they are actually taking energy from themselves or from around them, and putting it in this person's body to help heal them or whatever it is they do. I've never been to a practitioner, so I'm not really sure what they do.
Well, I think we probably have some people on our friends list of that and stuff. But I mean, like you have strange things that occur around with you. You have different type of experiences when it comes to abilities, and like you said, you seem to drain things around you. Other people have that too. So it's just, if we're gonna talk about this stuff, about even the plausibility of it even occurring or anything, why not throw everything in the kitchen sink for a theory?
If you're going to go down this road, then these people, they could possibly have some sort of psychic ability that is building up with them. So, some of these stories happened in a time where if they told about their psychic abilities, that they were tried as witches, or considered evil or whatever. So they hold all of this in, not daring to reveal it. That they have this ability. And maybe, what you say is they're holding it in to the point that it just explodes in them and they burst into flames.
Or they don't even know
or they don't know they have it, or they're not sure what's happening to them.
Exactly, or whatever. If we're just going to throw out different theories and ideas when it comes to this, because nobody really knows anything when it comes to this. There's people out there who are really trying to go at it really scientifically and everything else, and they're bringing in all avenues and trying to do, figure this stuff out too. But then there's other people are like, this is nothing but poppycock, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you're gonna have that in anything and everything, and we're not here to make y'all believe one way or the other, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there have been hundreds of reports of SHC since the first documented case,
right? And
all seem to follow a similar pattern. The victim is almost completely consumed. Mm-hmm. The victim is usually home alone. The coroner at the scene almost always notes a sweet, smoky smell in the room where the victim is found. The extremities of the victim mostly remain intact, even though the head and torso may be charred beyond recognition. The hands, feet, and many times the legs often remain unburned. Mm-hmm. The room around the person will show little, if any, damage or signs of fire, except for this greasy residue on the walls and furniture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the windows and stuff, yeah.
Right, and there have also been rare cases of the internal organs being untouched, even though the body is charred.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, not all victims of SHC just simply burst into flames. There is a small percentage that have survived.
Right, what we just talked about.
Right. These are people who have developed strange burns on their bodies where there is no explanation for them, and some have emitted smoke from their bodies when there was no fire present. Right. So not everyone who has caught fire has died.
Right.
One of the more recent cases made headlines in September of 2011. It is the first documented case of SHC in Ireland. The burned body of an elderly man was found lying with his head near the furnace in his apartment. Now, the coroner determined that the furnace was not the source of fire, and there was no accelerant on the body, and there was no evidence of foul play. Now, this case was typical of SHC in that there were burn marks on the floor and ceiling directly below and above the body, and no other burn marks anywhere in the room.
Yeah, you're right. The characteristics of these SHC bodies are always nearly all ash, or just leaving behind hardly any body parts. And, like you were saying, many seem to have been, they were alcoholics, or they were overweight, and there always seems to be like this strange scent that remains in the spot too. So, yeah. And also a lot of times just the middle section of the body, is always gone. The torso, right. The middle section, that's where all your organs and intestines, all this stuff is. And so it seems to me, if there were cases of this occurring, I'm not saying there hasn't, because I suppose, like I'm saying, almost anything could happen, rare but possible. I mean, since there are people who claim it has, because of these survivor stories that we're talking about. I mean, wouldn't you think there'd be more cases of this, though? I mean,
you would think.
There's like, I don't know, there's like, 7 billion people wandering around this planet of ours. Why are there supposedly only 200 reported cases of what, and we didn't even find all those 200 reported cases. We only found a couple, you know what I mean? Why isn't there more out there?
Well, there are several theories as to the source of SHC,
Right.
One being a peculiar shift of our internal chemistry that can happen to anyone at any time. And another is that because of what we eat, it produces gases like methane gases in our body that eventually ignite. And if you notice, most of these stories are women, And what does that tell you? It tells you that men are fart machines and get rid of all that gas.
That's not true, because we were just reading a bunch of guys, too. I think it was like an equal, though, actually, a little bit, if you remember kind of going up. But they, everybody's a little gassy. But we do know...
Men seem to expel it a lot often than women. And then there's this third theory that is just a fire that people cannot explain or cannot be bothered to find a cause.
Right. I mean, we do know the body can be, reduced down to ash, because it's in a, especially in a controlled environment, because you have the crematorium. But the heat and the flames that's like set to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the bodies are basically kind of cooked for like 2 hours. So, I mean, we know that the body can be reduced down to ash, but that's in a controlled environment that we do know it can happen,
Well, okay. It takes an incredibly hot flame to reduce a body to ash. Well, crematoriums have special chambers designed for this, but in almost all of these combustions, there are no burns in the room around the body. This indicates that the person stayed in one place.
Right.
So whatever is causing this combustion, it seems to knock people out first, which, if you think about it, may be a merciful blessing.
Right. Yeah, like you're saying, it kind of goes quickly, because it seems like it is going quickly. And a lot of the things that we were reading tonight, it seemed to happen quickly, So I don't know. But internal chemistry, a lot of people are talking about that as far as bantering and stuff like that. And, you kind of mentioned, like, the methane gas and such. And, just in a passing thought, like others are, talking in like, websites and chat tonight and everything else. Both you and I both know that the human body is made up of, like, basically 60% of water. And it's not really easily inflammable, you know what I mean? But, with all the things that one kind of pumps into their body, from chemicals via eating, drinking, medicine, alcohol, I mean, you're slathering all these things on your body, from makeup to lotions to perfumes to bug sprays, just you're showering in it, you're eating it, you're drinking it, and you're spreading chemicals all over yourself all the time. And, since the skin is, like, the largest organ, it is.
The skin is the largest organ in your body.
Right. But see, a lot of people don't know is that your skin is basically the last resort for toxins to leave. But it does absorb everything directly into our bloodstream. And the body straight into the body without the filtration system like you have via eating. Okay, because when you eat, it goes through all the different organs that help try to process out the toxins and kick it out. But could all these chemicals that somebody's pumping on and in their bodies over the years kind of store up in the body's fat and kind of create like this really rare chance of kind of creating like the perfect chemical environment where like these, I don't even know, complex chemical reaction could just start occurring within the body, causing it to start to heat up from the inside out, and then create like the possibility of maybe it generating enough heat to start to ignite a person's surface to catch on fire or start to smolder enough just to create this smoke and or fire. I mean, maybe the heat somehow affects the chemicals that one's, putting on their body daily, and then it suddenly, at somehow just the right components, ignites, thus causing like you, or maybe like the wick effect thing, like you're saying. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, you and I both don't really 100% believe in SHC, but whatever the case is, it seems that someone or some people have been affected by something. We just don't know what, True.
We just don't know what. SHC, while widely reported, has never been shown to be a real thing.
Right.
But most times the answer is that the person died while smoking and the cigarette caused them to burn. You can go to the internet and find many stories of SHC, and apparently this is a subject that has been not only talked about but considered a legitimate phenomenon, and conclusion to cases of people just going up in flames with heat intense enough to reduce them to ashes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I said before, I do not believe in SHC. I just cannot believe that a human can just suddenly one day burst into flames with enough heat to reduce them to ashes, yet not touch anything else around them.
Right.
Fire that intense, in my opinion, would also burn down their homes.
Right.
Now, this is not to say that I do not believe in spontaneous combustion. There are things that can and do spontaneously combust, although there are people that claim to have witnessed their spouse or friend suddenly experience what some call spontaneous human combustion. I myself just have a hard time wrapping my mind around such a thing to even occur, especially with as much water as the human body is. And the heat, when someone passes away and they are cremated,
mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of heat to reduce that body to ashes. And for one thing, and a lot of people don't know this, but when someone is cremated, all that is left are the bones. And when you receive their cremains, what you're getting is pulverized bone.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes an intense heat, and not just 2 hours. It takes just 2 to 3 hours alone just to dehydrate the body enough in that fire to catch it on fire.
Right,
because the first thing that happens is that all of this liquid in your body kind of evaporates or dries up.
Well, right, it's like 1,800.
Sorry for being so graphic.
Well, yeah, but they were saying like it's like it's anywhere between 14 to 18, 1,000
degrees in some cases more.
Well, right, but they were saying it could take anywhere between 2 to 3 hours to really create this type of environment to occur to bring the body to ash, and whatever. But I'm not saying that this can, and I'm not saying it can't occur, because there seems to be some kind of interesting things that are out there. So, maybe there is and maybe that's why there's just a small, rare amount of stories that's going on, because maybe it's just the right components in these people that they have. Maybe they all have some type of similar DNA, structure that's just a little bit different from everybody else's.
Yeah.
We just don't really know. And, but when it comes to life and all the strange things that occur daily, and stuff. I guess there's always just a rare chance or maybe the plausibility for it to maybe occur. And maybe one day scientists will be able to figure it out in like a controlled environment.
Exactly.
But
maybe.
But right. But Spooky, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to do for our next show?
Okay. I want to thank our mods, Vamp and Richard, for doing a good job tonight. Thank you, Raven, for a good show. And I want to thank everybody for coming in and those who are listening and everyone in chat. Join us Tuesday, April 19th, when we will discuss Haunted Colorado, the Beaumont Hotel, Independence, Central City, and much more. And tune in as we share several locations said to be visited by otherworldly entities.
Right, this is a recurring show topic that we have where we're going to kind of discuss all the haunted states. But this state was kind of mentioned at the last show we did for this one, and I think it was Rusty who kind of requested that we do Haunted Colorado.
Right. And thank you for coming. Please subscribe to us, give us a like, and share us with others on any social media site that you may be a part of.
Right. I just want to thank you again to the viewer who suggested this topic. Thank you all for coming, for sharing us with others, and we'll see you guys at other shows. There's other great shows on this week. You got Dom from Upstate Paranormal. You have Chris V, who has her shows on Sundays or Mondays. I'm not quite sure the time. You have Chris, who has the shows on Friday, and Rusty Reporter. He kind of does random shows. So you guys go check them out if you're into the paranormal and other odd stuff too, like we're talking about. Those guys have good stuff too. If you guys want to get show reminders, if you go down where the subscribe button is, you can click the cogwheel down there by our Spooky Raven name, and you can click to get reminders there, or you can go to our website and sign up for email reminders for future shows, or just go on Facebook and go to the Facebook page and get likes with that too. I just want to say thanks, everybody. Thanks for the awesome banter in the chat. Oh yeah, and Pumpkinhead Paranormal, he does great shows too. But thank you, everybody, and we'll see you guys around, and thank you, Spooky.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.